Welcome, everyone. Hi, I'm Chad McDaniel with Execs in the Know, and I know how busy everybody is at this time of year, and really just appreciate your time coming to listen to the topic. I brought in some really trusted friends and resources. We're going to introduce them here shortly, but the conversation is very important to where I think we're at as a community. As we think about is balancing channel choice in guided design to optimize customer experiences. Describe a little bit more what that'll be here shortly, but I know it's a very relevant topic and a needed conversation. So part of my goal today is to make sure as we lean in, we're going to really dive into some of these topics and how we can help each other through it. So there are a couple key takeaways that I want to make sure we get with our time today. So obviously evaluating the benefits of channel choice versus guided design for your brand. And both my guests, Lauren and Neil, are really going to help us into some, I think, some fantastic case study and some other ways that we can look at this maybe uniquely and differently. And hopefully we'll have some takeaways that we can go to our respective organizations. So each of these are kind of the key takeaways we're going to look to go with. And the final point there that it talks about tips for assessing organization or BPO operational readiness. I'm assuming a lot of us today do use some sort of a partner, a third party partner, and how important that is for us as organizations looking at the readiness of our partners. And we'll talk a little bit more about that with some suggested ideas. So if this is your first time to Execs in the Know, welcome. Execs in the Know, for the last 15 years, really is just a corporate CX sharing community I call Leaders Learning from Leaders. We're very authentic, we're real, we're your peers, we're just sharing insights and just, as I mentioned, best practices. And there's so many ways to get involved. So if you simply go to execsintheknow.com, go to our knowledge center, our resources tab, our event tabs. There's all sorts of information and ways for you to get involved, or reach out to me directly, chat@execsintheknow.com, and I'm happy to help. We have a tremendous board. I always like to just say thank you. They really help. They sit in the chair. There are a lot of our subject matter experts. They provide a lot of the insight and inspiration for us as a community of 8,000. Just really want to say thank you to our brand ambassadors of Execs in the Know and the respective industries that they serve and they do in their organizations. One of the best ways to get involved with the board and us is join our online community. It is corporate only. It's private. I call it like a LinkedIn on steroids for the CX leader. There's some amazing conversations going on in our Kia platform where questions are being asked or people are having different challenges and they're looking to each other for best practice sharing. So if you're not part of our online community, it's free to join. Just reach out to me, chat@execsintheknow.com, and I'll be happy to introduce you to our community manager and get you all set up. It's a really great tool, and I encourage you to join. I'm so thrilled. Doesn't this look like a fun place coming up in March? We're going to be in Tucson, Arizona for the next national summit. A lot of you come to the summit, and I really want to personally invite you to join us in Tucson. We've got some amazing speakers and content that we're going to be rolling out here soon, but a fabulous resort called the Star Pass JW Marriott down in the Tucson area. You're going to love the facility and the location and the content and everything we have planned. So mark your calendars right now for March 13th and the 15th of 2024. So excited for that. Okay, enough about Execs in the Know. Lauren and Neil, I'm going to have you introduce yourself here shortly. And I'll just say this to our audience. I have had literally the pleasure of knowing Neil and Lauren for a number of years. They're not just highly respected industry leaders and subject matter experts, but I really look at the two of them as friends of me and Execs in the Know because they're doing so much to help educate and share and advance our industry. And I just couldn't be more pleased to get a couple minutes of your time, I should say an hour of your time, Lauren and Neil, today to come out and let's lean into this conversation. So Lauren, let's start with you for the audience that's listening. Just if they're not familiar with you, a little bit quickly about your role, the company, and then Neil will turn to you and let us lean into the conversation.
Yep. So thank you. I've been part of this industry for about, I'd say, 16 years now. Always focused on innovation. Where's the industry going? How do I bring the best of that to the organizations I'm a part of? I am a proud member of VXI's CX advisory team. I lead up the practice within the organization. CX advisory is kind of like the consulting arm. So we're brought in to solve business problems, test new technology, or develop new capabilities, things of that nature. And it's been a pleasure working alongside Neil and helping our clients to kind of take their customer experience to the next level.
And I'll say this personally, Lauren, about you is that if anyone doesn't know Lauren, she has the most amazing high energy. This was before kids and even after kids, Lauren. I don't know if there's such a word as multitasker, but you've got it down. And I hope you and the family are doing well. And thank you for coming out for today again. And Neil, as always, you've got such a respected pedigree and background here and getting some of your time today. Thank you so much. And I appreciate it.
No, thank you. So yeah, I'm Neil Wright, Chief Digital Officer at VXI, a proud member of the Executives in the Know community for over 10 years. So very happy to be here and share some of our thoughts. Lauren, Chad, always a pleasure to take the stage. As the Chief Digital Officer, I'm here to help create value and partner with Lauren, working with our growth organization at VXI. But this is a subject that we're very passionate about and look forward to sharing some of our insights today.
So, audience, we're in great hands. Thank you, Lauren and Neil. And again, I think Neil and Lauren, there'll be some white papers and some other things that our audience can take advantage of the learning and sharing that we're going to be talking about. We'll call that out and make sure that it's in the engagement board where people can download it. So I encourage you to take advantage of the resources that are going to be provided. So I'm going to start this with Lauren. And you guys will be talking a little bit more about it. We had the chance recently to do a consumer research report together. And again, we'll make sure that everyone that listens to this recording gets an access or a downloadable copy of the report. But Neil and Lauren, it had all different kinds of insights and data charts and, really from a consumer sentiment and consumer point of view. When I just pulled out this simple one. And what's fascinating to me is that what was 10 years ago is still kind of the same. The biggest dissatisfaction from a customer point of view is when they have difficulty not being able to reach a live person if they need to reach a live person or not able to get resolution. It's all about that resolution. And this is not surprising, I don't think, to anybody that's listening to this call. But as we look to kind of go beyond that and just reinforce it, Lauren, I was going to turn to you, and I guess we'll talk a little bit about your story, and then we've got a number of different examples that we're going to talk into that will help us with this channel choice and guided design.
Perfect. Neil, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I'll kick us off. So a little bit about CX advisory, and Chad, thank you very much. At VXI, we're extremely proud to be part of the BPO sector. Our sector is an amazing industry with, I'll call it, over 3-4 decades worth of customer experience, but it really does have people at its core. And at VXI, we try and think differently in how we wrap solutions around the core human side of the business. So it's really that humanity of experience and how we can augment it and think differently. And that's really what gave birth to CX advisory within the organization, is ultimately how can we leverage a different way of thinking and technology in order to enhance the overall experience. So we're very proud to have differentiated experiences and thinking about how do we create or co-create value for our customers. And it's a very exciting time. And if you think of this report, some interesting call outs on the report, it is very interesting that there's more consumers looking for text-based support, and it continues to grow and accelerated by the pandemic. I think, as Chad indicated, people want to talk to a live agent, and they get frustrated with the inability to talk to a live agent. And ultimately, I think there was a point of reference: 68% of people were willing to pay more for world-class customer experience. So this represents an unbelievable time in this industry. And at VXI and within the CX advisory group, we look to try and build on that and ensure that we're driving the appropriate results. If we move to the following slide, there are some key areas that we try and bring. So we try and solve key core business problems. We try and ensure that we can co-design a blueprint in order to solve your operating environment for the future. We've got some results here on the right-hand side where we are an organization born from operations and trying to design the most optimal CX platform, leveraged and embracing elements of data and technology. And while it's extremely exciting, if we move to the next slide, we have a very unique time that we've all lived through. We had a unique global pandemic that we all went through, and it significantly accelerated probably a 10-year digital transformation plan and forced organizations to do it within a 3 to 6 to 12-month period. And then we had this little thing called GBT that then put some steroids on this acceleration, post-pandemic, which then all of a sudden, how are you implementing AI? Everybody is talking about the application of AI, but we have some elements of uncertainty. We have economic headwinds, we have inflationary pressures and wage pressures and employee retentions. This is an unbelievably exciting time and an inflection point. And this is something that CX Advisory and the VXI organization is really truly trying to build off of and apply AI, apply technology, apply different ways to rethink and reimagine and re-engineer our overall operating environment to drive towards resolution. And we've got some key tips that you're going to see through this presentation that we hope that you'll be able to apply to your business.
Neil, I was just going to ask you, I love this slide, by the way, and I'm a visual type of person, so this is great. On the uncertainty piece, I mean, it's a bit of a guess, but I find us very much in this uncertainty piece real time as today, but in 2 to 3 years, do you think we're still going to be pretty driven by that uncertainty, or what's going to be one of the mitigating factors that may take us a little bit less in that category, do you think?
I still think there'll be a level of uncertainty. There's one factor that we haven't called out here in terms of uncertainty, which is the geopolitical issues. We all know some of the terrible situations that the world is facing, whether it be in, we'll call it Eastern Europe, or whether it be in the Middle East. These are times where, as humans, we have to think differently, and as operators, we need to think differently. So I do anticipate that level of uncertainty will continue to exist, and rather than shy away from it, as an organization, and it's a strong point of reference for us within all of our engagements, is embrace it. And this is a time to think differently about where the human being in a chair is operating, how best to support your business, but also think differently about how you're engineering your overall self-help network and your digital platform in order to have a greater degree of resolution and ensure that you're supporting your customers in a very timely fashion.
Well, I thank you, and I appreciate some of the reminders. I don't know if there's one brand in here that is not identifying right now to any of those bullet points on uncertainty. So it's interesting times for all of us as CX leaders. And I know we've got a number of different case studies we're going to get into. And this slide has a little bit of the visual of our report we did together, Execs In The Know. We partnered with VXI, and I highly encourage you, if you don't have the report, do get a copy, download it. Neil, did you want to just call out a couple of things? And this is not giving it all the due diligence it deserves, but there may be a couple of things here that you wanted to speak to, or Lauren.
Yeah, I'll just touch on a couple of items before I hand it over to my colleague here. I think what's fascinating is customers are still having a high degree of confidence that they'll have their issue resolved in voice. But individuals are looking to text more, and they're looking to say, well, how can I move into digital? And if you look at ultimately the increase in activity in a text-based interaction, but then ultimately how they resolve their issue, what we do is we have a way of thinking about, we have a responsibility here. If consumers want to start in a particular channel, how do we can stay within that channel and move towards resolution? But there may be times where we might want to guide them to a different channel based on what their challenges are. And so again, this represents an amazing opportunity, then supported by such an exceptional report, to embrace this data and then to really truly look at re-engineering your operating environment to meet your customer where they want to be supported, but also ensure that is it the right channel that's going to get them a speedy resolution to whatever their issue is. So I think this is a very relevant data point, and I'm excited to see what this could show us in 2023, 24, and 25.
Yeah, it's interesting when you look at the 2021, 22, 23 over the 3 years. Just look at the voice-based one. To me, that's improvement at 23 from 22. And again, a bit of a moment of time, but it looks like improvements are being made there to get resolution non-voice.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's a great segue into the following slide. Lauren, if you want to start talking to us about kind of your perspective on choice versus guidance, looking at some of the economic factors, resolution factors, and customer factors.
Absolutely. Thank you, Neil. Let's talk about the great debate that has been happening in our industry for decades now. Do I go channel choice, or do I go channel guidance? And which one's better? And so ultimately, let's first start off by kind of defining the differences, right? When we say channel choice, that involves providing the channel options to the customer and letting them choose their channels based on preference, convenience, comfortability. And ultimately, what you're doing is you're putting the customer in control and you're deprioritizing cost, right, with your decision. Versus channel guidance, also referred to as right channeling, which involves designing a context strategy supported by technology to reach the right person, the right time, and in the lowest cost channel. And that's the key, right? The lowest cost channel. And if you think about the economy that we're living in today, there is a lot of pressure on CX professionals to do more with less right now. And ultimately, the key to right channeling in this economy is determining the lowest cost channel that will resolve the customer's issue quickly and to their satisfaction. And so I recently read an article that was by Service XRG that said the first contact resolution cost for phone is averaging around $49, emails around $36, and self-service is around $11. So while offering channel choice can be, there's something to be said about offering channel of choice, it can also be enormously expensive, especially in today's economy when we're trying to figure out how do we optimize our cost and pinch our pennies every way that we possibly can. And so, the key here is how do we guide customers to the right answer fast, which leads me into the next slide, Chad. At the end of the day, if you think about it, customers only care about one thing. Please solve my answer fast, right? Because why? Because at the end of the day, time is the most valuable resource. Nobody wants to pick up a phone and call customer service and take time out of their busy days and their busy schedules, try to solve a problem. The funny quote, the best service is no service, right? And why is that? Because time is valuable. So we as CX professionals, we have to put the customer at the center of all we do. And it starts first by asking yourself, who is our customer, right? What channels are they using? And ultimately understand the contact drivers when thinking about a channel guidance strategy. And so I'm gonna use an example here. So let's pretend that we are a faucet company and our top contact driver is my faucet is leaking, right? And so I want you to think about what that experience is like in email. So what's going to happen is the agent is going to send 6 questions to the customer, troubleshooting questions. The customer is going to respond back to 3 of those. The agent's then going to respond back and try to get answers to the other 3 questions that were missed. And you can kind of see this start to be this back and forth, right? This long drawn out resolution for that particular contact type. And ultimately that's what we want to try to avoid is, even though email might be someone's preference for that contact driver, you're not going to get the right answer fast. There's no way, versus if I could send them a text message, they can click the link and it activates the camera on their phone. They can show me their faucet. I can tell them to click that screw and turn it left or turn it right or whatever you need to do. That's a much better experience. That's going to get the right answer fast. And that's how we have to think as an industry. If you go to the next slide, Chad, now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to play devil's advocate. And I'm going to swing the pendulum back a second to channel of choice. And so in the Execs In The Know report, the survey revealed that channel choice, or at least the illusion of choice, leads to higher CSAT rates. And so when customers are forced into taking a multi-channel approach, as opposed to choosing the approach, resolution rates are lower by 6 to 14 points, which is a substantial difference when considering the negative impact of unresolved issues. So what I want to paint the picture of here is there still is the ability to find the best of both worlds, right? And how do you do that? Well, one, you can provide the illusion of choice. And let me share an example with you. So I'm going to start first with what you see up here on the screen on the right-hand side is, let's pretend we're an airline, right? And what you're looking at here is, this is the self-help center for the airline. And so I'm a passenger. I land on the self-help center. It says, we're here to help. And then it says, please click your reason for reaching out. And so in this particular case, I'm going to hit manage travel. If you click spacebar, Chad, you're going to show it's going to move to the next, it's going to animate here. So now it's going to say, great, how can we help you manage your travel? If I click on change or cancel, if you hit spacebar one more time, I'm going to guide the customer to a live agent assisted channel. And in this particular case, I'm saying request a callback or chat with us. And so what did I do here? Because we think about change or cancel, if someone's canceling their reservation, that's lost revenue. And as a customer service team, like anytime someone wants to cancel their subscription or cancel their reservation or refund a product or return a product, that is our last chance as service professionals to save that relationship with the customer. So in those particular instances, I will always want to guide them to a live agent, always. Empathy is probably going to be needed in that particular case. And so that's something a bot could never provide, right? That's a particular contact driver you would never want to hand over to a bot or a self-help article. You want to deepen the relationship with your customer and save them, right? So in this particular example, what I did is I guided them to 2 live agent channels, phone and chat. So they can still pick which one they want. And that's assuming that phone and chat makes sense for that particular contact driver, right? So there's an example of how we can provide the illusion of choice. If you go to the next slide, Chad, there's one more example that I'm going to talk about. How can we find the best of both worlds? Channel guidance and channel choice, right? And blend them. So this slide illustrates what we call at VXI the next generation operating model. And ultimately, we are building this model out for our clients, right? And so one of the questions I'll get asked me is, well, Lauren, how does generative AI play into channel choice and channel guidance? Well, here's an example, right? So let's pretend the customer lands on that help center page and they are greeted by a generative AI bot who is cross-channel, cross-platform. And the goal of that generative AI bot is to, one, identify the intent of the customer, maybe authenticate the customer, and personalize the experience, right? And ultimately serve as that traffic cop. And they're going to start, that bot will help us route, in some cases, that might be able to answer the question entirely, right? Which is Nirvana. In other cases, maybe it's a routine inquiry or transactional, and we can solve to some self-service resources or maybe a peer-to-peer community. And so you have to start to map out this journey. Which ones can the generative AI bot solve? Which ones need to go more into the self-help center or peer-to-peer community? In other cases, it's going to be complex inquiries. In that particular case, you want to route to that live agent. And whether it's chat or voice or email or social or even a gig CX agent for that matter, which maybe should also be considered as part of the operating model. And so in that particular case, you're ultimately going to guide them to the right channel. If that channel doesn't work, then you want to guide them to the next best channel. You never want to lead them to a dead end. And I'll show you an example of this in a couple slides. But this is another example of how you can still kind of offer the illusion of choice, but still be guiding them based on their reason for reaching out. Chad, if you go to the next slide, I'm going to one more time, I'm going to swing the pendulum back and play devil's advocate. And ultimately, what I want to call out here is that what's right for one company may not be right for another company. And so let me give you an example of this, right? So what I described in the last 2 slides was amazing. It was Nirvana. And so, but at the end of the day, let's pretend I am Jitterbug, the cell phone for the elderly. And if you guys have ever seen that cell phone, it's the really big cell phone. It has a loudspeaker. It has loud buttons. In some cases, it has 2 buttons. It has a red one and a green one, and it's meant so that the elderly can call their son or daughter. And that's the whole purpose of the phone. In that particular case, would I ever want to offer that customer base email or chat or text as an option? Probably not. In fact, when we had this program, we used to do sensitivity training for the agents and like picture wearing gloves and yellow glasses. And that's what the experience is like for the customer. And so now try texting in that situation with these gloves on, and right, you would never want to offer those particular channels. Voice is the best channel, and it's the only channel for that customer base. So now let's also use one more example. I am a busy mom. I fall into that category. Like Chad mentioned, I have two amazing boys who keep me very busy. So let's pretend you are the company you work for provides products that are nutrition for infants, right? And your customer base is that busy mom. Would you ever want to offer voice to that particular customer? I will tell you firsthand, I would never want to take a customer service phone call when my boys are in the room. It is so hard to have a conversation when my boys are present, let alone try to like deal with customer service and the constant interruption from your kids, where messaging makes way more sense for that particular customer base. And so the reason I'm playing devil's advocate and I'm showing you this different examples is because when it comes to the art of design, it starts first with who is your customer, what channels do they use on a daily basis, and what are your contact drivers, right? You've got to start with those three, and you've got to figure out what makes sense for you and your organization. And I think that's why there's been such a debate for the last 10 years on this topic, because there is no right answer. You have to consider the nature of your business, the nature of your industry, your customers, your contact drivers, and take a step back and figure out what's the right design. If you go to the next slide, Chad, I'm going to hand it over to Neil, who's going to talk about this tightrope that we walk, and how it's a lot harder than it looks.
It's a never-ending debate. In fact, Lauren and I had this debate again today about channel of choice versus guided path. I think there's some areas we do want to call out. So we do need to make sure that when you look at channel choice, it might be ideal for your customers, but you do also need to make sure that you don't add friction into the engagement with the customer. You do need to make sure that depending on what your hoop or your hours of operation, that you do have, do you have real-time support? Are there individuals that if you give them the choice, do they want to then pick a channel that you're not supporting? So we do think it's extremely important to be aware of some of the roadblocks or some of these points of friction that you take a look at, and you want to make sure that you are truly deepening the relationship with the customer. You want to make sure that whatever the solution that you have is advancing that customer lifetime value, making sure that they are a true promoter of your business and your brand. On the right-hand side here, we talk about some very important considerations. Customer experience always remains the highest priority, but we do need to make sure that we're focused in on a timely resolution. You don't want to then offer up someone having a choice of voice. They go into voice and they get lost in an IVR where they're just looking at doing a password reset. If you're just trying to reset your password, might be easier just to pivot from an IVR into a digital channel and just allow somebody to have self-help. And that could be a link that you're sending to their mobile phone, or you can allow them to move from an IVR, become untethered from their PC, and then move to their mobile device in order to look at their resolution. Some other areas here are cost to serve. Voice is still extremely expensive. It is the most expensive channel. And so we do need to balance resolution, customer experience, and cost. It's a responsibility as a business leader to look at that three-legged stool on how best to engineer it. You need to look at your contact drivers and understand what are the top contact drivers and what is the right channel that if you are going to implement a guided path, this might actually move towards a more effective, lower cost resolution for your customers. And what's most important, as Lauren indicated, it's not the same size and the same fit for every single organization. You need to understand your customer segmentation, the industry that you're in, and how best to engineer that optimal environment, looking at choice versus guided, looking at digital versus voice. So there are some strong considerations that we would encourage you to wrap around data and make sure that you are thinking ahead of the actual design and implementation of your overall support network. So we've got a couple of tips here that I'm going to hand back to my colleague, Lauren, where she'll guide you through some tips and some tricks just across some of the businesses and brands that we support.
Awesome. Thank you, Neil. Chad, if you want to move to the next slide, which is the first tip, which is the starting point for all design. Start by collecting and analyzing data. Our CX advisory team, when we go in and we do a current state assessment, we always start with data. And so we talked about the first three, right? What's the nature of your business? Who is your customer? What are their contact drivers? Very, very important. But the other really important piece is understanding your current state. The way things are laid out today, are your customers getting their issues resolved? Yes or no? And what's the satisfaction level on each of those channels today? Those are important considerations. And so, for example, if you're seeing a high resolution rate and high CSAT on a given channel, don't fix what's not broken. Maybe instead turn your attention to, you know what? How do I make my agent more efficient on those interactions? How do I allow them to find the right answer fast? So it's a shorter phone call or a shorter interaction, right? And maybe it's better to spend your time there than trying to re-engineer it in that case, right? So those are things that you want to really focus on. And we had the privilege too of doing this on behalf of one of the largest kind of food delivery clients, where we went in and we analyzed current state and we looked at data, and we came back to them and we discovered that some of their top 3 pain points could all be solved by using an agent assist tool, right? That we're working to pilot with them. And so, that's something that it's a reality, and you gotta, the devil's always in the details, and the details always sits in the data. So start there, right? Start first by looking at your current state and identifying your pain points and your areas of opportunity. Tip number 2 is consider the pros and cons of each channel. So if you're thinking about launching a new channel, right? Maybe you want to launch, let's say, SMS. Ask yourself, number 1, if you're thinking about launching SMS, what are the pros and cons? So number 1 is, where are your customers today? Are they in the US or are they global? Let's say 30% of your customers are global. Then maybe you want to consider WhatsApp messaging instead, right, than SMS. Or what are your contact drivers? If your contact drivers are account payment billing subscription, WhatsApp is a much more secure channel than SMS, right? SMS has no encryption, where WhatsApp and messaging is encrypted. And so those are things that, again, what's right for one business might not be right for another. Thinking about who your customers are and where they're at, these are all part of the things you want to consider. And then also I want to add, in what the pandemic did is it really helped accelerate the move to digital. And one of, I would say right now, because of all the cost pressures going on, all of our clients are focused on ways to cut cost. And all of the clients are trying to figure out, how do we move from voice to digital, right? And so there's options. So what we're doing is we're helping our clients implement channel pivoting strategies, where there's certain contact drivers. When you dial into the 800 number, you can pivot them very easy into chat or into SMS or into messaging. And so those are also things that, as you think about the pros and the cons, that you should be considering in your design, because when the next pandemic happens, let's hope it doesn't, but when the next big world event happens and it impacts, everything, having, more self-help in place, having more digital channels in place where you can have higher concurrency rates, those are all very valuable things in those kind of moments. If you go to the next slide, Chad, we'll hit on tip number 3, which this is one of my favorites. Take a test and learn approach. And so this is a case study that we had with one of our very large gaming clients. And so this particular client, every fall, they have to triple the size of their headcount, because every fall they come out with a new product, and every fall they have the fun of holiday time. And so we started brainstorming with them. And at the time, they offered email. And they had a lot of email and chat, and they had a lot of troubleshooting was their big contact drivers. And we said, you know what, why not offer WhatsApp messaging or async messaging as a channel, right? When you think about gamers and how they want to communicate, not email, especially for troubleshooting. Async would probably be a lot better channel to offer. And so we took a 2-phased approach, and we did a test and learn approach. We said, you know what, phase 1, let's do channel of choice, let's offer it as a choice, and let's see the adoption rate of consumers picking this channel. And then phase two, we can then look at channel guidance, right? What's the right contact drivers that we should be displaying async for? And so we did that, right? Is we started with channel of choice. We launched the pilot, huge adoption. So there were things that we were measuring the success of that pilot on. One was looking at the adoption rate, looking at the resolution rate, looking at our effort score, our NPS scores. We had higher resolution on that particular channel across all the channels. We had higher NPS and the highest CSAT on async messaging outside of the other channels that were being offered. So to us, that was a huge win. So he's like, all right, great. We know that our customers use the channel. They like the channel. They're getting faster resolutions. This is a win-win-win across the board. And ultimately what happened was we were able to save 400 FTE. We were able to reduce for that seasonal peak. So they no longer have to ramp 400 FTE because of the power of async messaging and the benefit of concurrency. So ultimately it was a win. And sometimes it takes that, right? Sometimes it takes doing a pilot or a test and learn approach to understand what your customers like and don't like and where you can find those fast resolutions. If you go to the next slide, tip number 4 is how do we optimize existing channels through process excellence? And so in this particular situation, right, when we go in and we do current state assessment, one area is you always look at the KPI data, like I talked about in tip number 1. Start there. But ultimately, you got to do some detective work yourself too. And whether that is doing some journey mapping, whether it's doing some process mapping, whether it's doing time and motion studies, whether it's doing mystery shopping, right? Those are all very good additional data points that you need to look at and consider as you build out your design and what makes sense for your business. And so, some of what we've done for a particular large kind of TV streaming client of ours is, we did those time and motion studies and we mapped the agent journey and we identified there was areas of opportunity to remove kind of those non-value added steps in the process, right, to drive down AHT. And so, there's lots of efficiency gains that can come through just optimizing existing channels through process excellence that shouldn't be overlooked as well. And then last but not least is tip number 5, and this is ensuring a smooth live agent handoff in soft landing. So if you look on the left-hand side here, this is what I call kind of a typical experience. So we do a lot of mystery shopping in the consulting that we do. And anytime I go out to a brand's, self-help center, I'll notice, I'll see the same kind of thing where there's lots of great articles and resources. And what'll happen is at the very end of the article, the resource, it'll say, was this information helpful? Yes or no? And so I always test this, right? And I hit no. And a lot of times what it does is it pops open a comment box, which is great. You're capturing customer feedback, which is really great. You should capture feedback. But what happens here is you send the customer to a dead end. At that point, they don't have a resolution. They tell you the information wasn't helpful, and bam, I hit a dead end. And what happens now is I'm forced to start over. And so instead, if you move over to the right-hand side, right, instead of asking them, was this information helpful? Ask, was your issue resolved? Yes or no? And if that customer hits no, this is when you're going to populate those next 2 best channels, in some cases, maybe 3 best channels that the customer needs to try. And maybe at that point, you're guiding them to the live agent assisted because they tried self-help and it failed. And what you're going to do on the back end is you're going to measure that, right? Because I like to say, you design it and how you design it in your head sounds good, but then you see reality and you realize, ooh, I guess that self-help article is not working the way I intended it to work, or that how-to video is not solving the problem because, 32% of customers said their issue wasn't resolved after watching the video or reading the article. And so this is a really important point too, is never lead your customer to a dead end. in your self-help experience. It's something that you need to take in consideration. On that note, I'm going to hand it back to Neil, who's going to talk a little bit about assessing organizational readiness.
Yeah, I think we've seen some common themes here. I think the number one theme that we really want to drive home is investing up front is going to have a clear payback. If you can take the time to own the data and think differently about your business, looking at, how you do a current state analysis, what's the art of the possible and how do you want to guide? But that upfront investment is always going to have a clear payback. And the second one is developing a framework. This is ultimately, again, when you think about this re-engineering or engineering of your CX environment, what is that framework? How do you want to make sure that you're understanding there is a human being in a chair and there's a consumer that is initiating an inquiry into your business wherever they are in their respective journey? But how do you optimize and engineer that environment to ensure that you can get a resolution, a business outcome, while also keeping in mind the human being that's in the chair that might be engaging within that customer, or the technology that's driving the self-help interaction or the digital interaction? And finally, just embracing the data. We can't stress it enough. You need to understand the data. You need to understand the contact drivers coming into your business. You need to understand the reporting points through your operating environment. And this is one of the areas that we would, strongly encourage you to download the white paper for the organization. And we certainly are offering a small and initial upfront assessment with the CX advisory group into the business. And we'd be more than happy to talk about some of the operational playbooks that we built out for our customers. But if we move to the next slide, this is one of the most important points. Sometimes the best service is not needing servicing at all. So if you look at proactivity, in that word proactivity, there's nothing that delights me more as a consumer if somebody or an organization proactively reaches out to me and says, wow, we're actually thinking on your behalf about items like a method of payment. So let's use method of payment as a specific example. If everyone has had one of these situations, whether you lost your credit card or you have a new credit card that's coming in, all of a sudden now it's disrupted the streaming service. It's disrupted your overall interactions. Well, how can we look at the contact drivers and understand what's the data set that we have in our organization? Do we know when a method of payment is going to be changing? So how can we anticipate that there's going to be an action required? And can we look at automating some of these interactions? Can we look at proactively notifying customers about a change in their method of payment so that they can authorize or update through self-help that method of payment? So that we can then understand, is it actually going to be removing that contact type from our overall operating environment, resolving an issue before the customer even realized that they were going to have an issue? And sometimes it may not work. And this is the final stage of analyzing it, understanding, did we actually have a material business benefit here to the brand, or did we have a resolution benefit to a consumer? And sometimes you may not, but you need to understand and embrace that fail fast type mentality of applied learnings. Try something new, try and look at that anticipation, that automation, and then analyze the result. And if it doesn't solve the issue the first time, or if it doesn't work 100% of the time, just rethink and reimagine and try and best approach that overall interaction and make sure that you have that benefit to the consumer. And that's ultimately takes us to our final slide. This is the VXI way. We really do try and rethink and reimagine and re-engineer overall CX. We try and think differently. We always respect that we are in the BPO business. There is a human being and always a need for a human being in a chair. But what we should be doing is rethinking and reimagining and re-engineering our operating environment, trying to pull out some of those easier interactions that should be managed through a digital interaction, so that the most important interactions, the more complex interactions, are landing to a human being in the chair. And then how do we understand what those interactions are? And this ultimately brings us back to our key core element of channel choice versus channel guidance. It's making sure that you understand your data, you understand your consumer, you understand your business, and how you can engineer that operating environment to keep the customer experience in mind, resolution in mind, and have a high degree of empathy, making sure that you have a mutually beneficial outcome for both your business, your brand, and most importantly, your customer. So with that, Chad, I'll hand it back to you.
Well done. And before I dive into some of that, audience, I just want to continue to reinforce to download the report that there's a couple of reports here that I want to make sure you get. One is the recent study. We partnered with VXI, with the consumer survey. And there's a number of great data sets, and I'm not going to overwhelm you all with all of these charts I'm going to go through, but I just want to let you know that you don't have to go at this alone. the knowledge is there, the information's there that you could take back into your CXO group or into whatever you need in data sources that can help you. So do get a copy of the report that we've been referencing. So all of these types of data charts, these types of slides, again, are in that report. And there's really some great information. And as you read through it, if there's certain questions, I'm happy to put you in touch with our research group or even with Neil and Lauren, and we can help unpack any of the data charts that you're seeing there that support this. So again, I encourage you to do that. So I want to go into some questions and basically, Neil and Lauren, I was listening very closely and so much to unpack. I loved the tips. I loved the Nirvana state, all of that. And Neil, I feel like even in 10 years from now, it's going to be the same thing. Customers want first resolution, ease of effort. They want to be able to get to a live agent if they get stuck in some sort of digital channel. I feel like that's going to stay the same from now until eternity. And that's not going to change. So if we know that, and that's sort of a baseline, it's all in the mechanics of how, what, when, and where, and why for us as respective brands. And I was even thinking about your VXI CX advisory services. I want to clarify that if I'm listening to this, is there an offer that you guys would do a free advisory or assessment, I should say, of where my state of the state is with some of the channel guidance and channel alignment?
Yeah, you are correct. Yeah, so we're very happy to offer to the attendees of this webinar and the individuals that download it a free assessment. It's an initial, what we call a thin assessment, which is a flyby, which is ultimately us looking at your operating environment in your digital channels and providing some tips and tricks. So much like Lauren walked us through some of her tips and tricks, we would do this outside-in assessment from a consumer standpoint and provide some initial recommendations. And we'd be more than happy to partner with any of the brands on this webinar.
Okay, so basically it would be maybe a mini snapshot, 3-4 pages or less. Like you said, initial flyby, but hey, I'm all about let's take advantage of the opportunity. Let's take advantage of the insights and data. And if you folks are willing to do that, I would strongly encourage from a different assessment, take a look at that and maybe take advantage of that. And Neil, I believe, yes, in the attendee section here, there is the VXI assessment report that they would download, and that's how they could get to some of that information, correct?
That is correct. Yes, be more than happy to follow up with anyone and have a more deeper conversation.
Okay, perfect. I just want to clarify. Well, let's get into a couple of questions because both you and Lauren intrigued me quite a bit. And, when I was thinking of all the different, I think there were 5 distinct tips that you went through, Lauren. I don't see any of them in isolation. I see them all as in one. One can't happen without the other, so to speak, and they're all probably very, very important. I still go back to, and I like the slide of the illusion of different channels that you talked about, and then you got into the next generation operation model. I'm just going to quickly go back to that slide, Lauren. I think it was slide 16, and let me push it to the audience here so everyone sees it. Neil, you see this on your slide or on your screen. What I guess, Lauren, here, if this is Nirvana and where we want to be, we're thinking of getting there. It goes back to, I guess, some of the unique challenges or some of the things. I know we mentioned about the data and we mentioned about all these other things, but I'm just thinking of a starting point. Maybe it's been said, but again, if this is where we want to go, what has been your observation with working with some of the brands? Where have those challenges been, or what has been some of the maybe failure points that have happened and why?
Yeah, I think sometimes. Oh, I got an echo. Can you still hear me okay?
Yep, I hear you.
I think some of the failure points, at the end of the day, sometimes what brands do is they think about their tech stack and they feel like the limitations of the tech stack. At the end of the day, everything starts with process. You got to start first with process. Tech stack is important, but kind of looking at understanding your current state, understanding your contact drivers, understanding the process for each of those contact drivers are all equally important, and it can't be overlooked. And so, the what's really funny is, we'll go through and we'll do mystery shoppings, and I go through and I give readings, and a lot of times like the brands are kind of shaking their head and smiling. They're like, yeah, we know that. And sometimes they just feel handcuffed to, well, there's technology limitations or limitations in resources, which is always another big one too. So that's where we like to hone in and help to say, we have the resources, um, you know, we can help you, whether it's from a process mapping perspective or on the technology side as well.
And do you feel, Neil, I'll ask you, I mean, as an industry, where do you think percentage wise we're at this moment right now? Do you see it less than 10%, greater than 10%? I mean, I'm asking you to guess a little bit, but what would you say we're at right now as an industry?
That's a tough question. I think depending on the vertical, generally speaking, I'll say we're at about 15%, and it's never going to be good enough. And the reason I say it's 15% is, I do think that there are constraints. There's constraints in terms of money. There's constraints in terms of the acceleration of digital through the pandemic that has disrupted in a very, very tight, compact timeframe operating environment. It's made it very difficult. You also equally have, I'll call it, a more traditional BPO industry now that's having to catch up and shift a little bit more in terms of consumer expectations and business expectations. And the final comment is, while we have galvanized CX, which is extremely important because the customer experience is extremely important, we also can't forget about the EX. And I do think that there needs to be a shift in order to improve from 15% to, call it, 50 to 65 to 75%. There needs to be a more balanced shift where we can think outside in and optimize and engineer that customer environment to go through channel choice, channel guidance towards resolution. But equally, we need to ensure that we've armed the employees with the right data. Do they have the ability to support the consumer regardless of channel of choice to move towards resolution? So unfortunately, I think the landscape has changed significantly, which is where I would reference a smaller degree in terms of percentage. But I think, again, this presents an opportunity. There's a lot of white space for us to grow towards a resolution.
Yeah, it'd be fascinating if we had this conversation 3 years from now to see where we may shift and where the jumping point will eventually be. And as we were having this entire conversation, I always go back to, what are we trying to solve? Is it a cost issue? Is it an effort issue? Is it a customer pushing us for whatever reason? It's probably a combination of all of those things, that are getting us there. But I think we can't stay static. We have to continuously look at how we're reinventing experiences for all the reasons we know as CX leaders. Neil, I hope this is not an uncomfortable question to you, but I think of, as an organization, VXI, you handle millions of customer interactions and, thousands or hundreds of different customer brands. Do you guys have the technology that is supporting this type of tech stack, how you're servicing and supporting your internal clients? Is some of that there today for your existing clients and how they're using you?
Yeah, great question. So, build, buy, and partner. If you look at that methodology, it's a methodology we embrace. We pride ourselves to say that we are a technology-driven organization. But much like what we get into channel of choice and channel of guidance, one size and one solution doesn't fit everything. So we're certainly not going to look to displace very large technology organizations that are out there. But we may actually look at building out complementary technology in order to optimize the operating environment. So we see ourselves as technology agnostic. Where it makes sense for us to build technology, we have in the past built that. Where we look to partner with organizations in order to optimize it, or even provide recommendations to customers, we have. And where it makes sense for us to acquire technology and apply it. But technology is extremely critical. We can never forget about the human being, in the business that we're in. But technology is something that we absolutely embrace.
And I truly believe VXI Audience as an organization is one of our more mature BPOs. I know there's a number of different organizations doing all sorts of things, but just from the clients that I know in our community that Neil and Lauren use your services, there's always been very high sentiment. So keep up the good work and keep re-engineering and keep reinventing. It's a learning process together. And I really think as an industry, we rely more so than ever on our third-party providers, such as VXI. It's more than a partnership. It's a survival, so to speak, in that type of synergy in the organizations, in my belief. Lauren, we started the conversation out about, we wanted to have a conversation about balancing channel guidance or channel choice and channel guidance. And I think we accomplished some of the things here today as far as an education. You did a very good job of giving us some case studies. As we unpack anything in sort of final thoughts, Lauren, would there be, again, anything you'd like just to encourage this audience, or why we're having this conversation? Why do we need to continue to have this conversation? But I know you're a bit of a futurist yourself. You're also a techie a bit, Lauren. Your mind is always very intrigued. But what would you want to just continue to embark on the final thoughts today for our audience?
Yeah, in terms of my final thoughts, it's really around the economic pressures that everyone's facing and the focus on cost optimization. Designing your operating model is really critical, and there could be some huge cost savings if done right. But there's lots to consider in that journey, right, of what makes sense for your company and your brand. But it's definitely a viable option when you're trying to think about ways to cut costs and to save. So, if you haven't been thinking about it, start to think about it. If you need help, we are here to help you. So feel free to reach out to myself or to Neil, and we absolutely will kind of help guide you in the right direction in terms of what makes the most sense.
Awesome. And not that you have to, but I was going to say before I sign off, Neil and Lauren, would you like to ask me a question of anything we've talked about here today? I've been asking you a lot of questions, but we're in this together, I think, as a community and as an industry. So I'm not sure if there's a quick question you want to ask me.
No, I think just maybe a quick ask. I'm certainly excited for the upcoming summit that's in Arizona. Would love to continue the conversation. I think channel choice and channel guidance, was a key topic that we discussed in your Nashville summit. I'd like to continue. I think, to your point, in 3 years, we're still going to be having this conversation, this debate. And I think we are a community of community members, and let's keep sharing ideas. And I think I'll build off of what Lauren said. We're here to help. We're here to have a conversation. I would just ask Chad that, you're a fantastic platform in your community. If we can just continue this dialogue and make sure that we're sharing our learnings, because that's what communities are all about.
No, well said. And I do feel there's a sincere honesty and a bit of a purity with all of it. And we really are willing, all of us, to give and learn together. And Neil and Lauren, you guys have been instrumental in that with us along that path and journey. Well, I want to say, I know our time goes really fast here, but audience, I really do appreciate your listenership today. I know how tight everyone's time is, but if you'll do me a big favor, please download the couple of resource reports that we asked today or we provided. I think knowledge is power, and we've got to be students of self-study. As I mentioned many times before, you don't have to go at this alone. You can join the community in our online forum. Lauren and Neil, I'm happy to get you in touch with them if there's any questions you have from today's conversation. But let's just keep the conversation going, and that's how continuous improvement always happens. I will say to all of our leaders out there, I know your heart's in the right place. You're doing some amazing things. You're looking at being very innovative. Just keep customer number one like you've been doing. And I know how much hard work everyone. So thank you from myself and everyone else for doing such an incredible job towards customer success. All right. Well, Lauren and Neil, thank you. I hope we get an opportunity to partner on another report or something else coming up here soon. But as always, it's a pleasure working with you. And audience, thank you for your listenership today.